Today we're going to set the internet afire with myths that guitar players think are true. Obviously, a lot of people are going to have some strong opinions about these myths, whether they're for them or against them. But please understand, the information I'm presenting today is based on not only my experience, but a lot of fact-checking that I did with a lot of companies. And although I've gone to great extremes to make sure I fact-check this information as best I can, please understand that everybody's going to have a different opinion about this. Feel free to put the comments down below. This is an open discussion channel, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on each one, or even a couple that you agree with or disagree with. Myth number one, although you should never handle a hot tube. The myth is that guitar players believe that if you touch the tube with bare hands, the oils from your skin or dirt will get on the glass, and when you plug in the amp, it could cause the tube to crack or break or be damaged. That's not true at all. In fact, most amp builders, whether they be small boutique builders or manufacturers, when I talked to them, stated that they don't use any special gloves or cloths when handling the tubes, that they handle the tubes with their bare hands and there isn't an issue. Now, sometimes they may wipe the tubes down when they're done, obviously because it'll make them look better since it's a new amplifier. So why is the myth if you touch a tube, it can be damaged? Well, the belief of most of the amp manufacturers I talked to was because you can't touch halogen light bulbs. There is a disclaimer on halogen light bulbs that says, please do not touch the bulbs, that the oils in your skin will cause the bulbs to heat unevenly. Now, that has nothing to do with tubes, but they believe that that kind of information got moved over to the tube world. But like all myths, there's probably some truth to this. So if you were to use a cloth to handle the tubes and plug them in the amp, no one believes that would be bad. So if you decide to err on the side of caution, you're fine. But more importantly, if you touch a tube and then you realize a couple days later that you didn't wipe it down, don't freak out. There's nothing to prove that you've damaged the tube. Myth number dos. Probably the most controversial of all the myths today. Shipping guitars in tune will damage them. First of all, after talking to many manufacturers in the US, they have all stated they ship guitars in tune. In fact, shipping guitars in tune is not only exclusive to manufacturers, stores that set up guitars tend to ship them in tune as well. So why is the myth that shipping a guitar in tune will damage the guitar? Well, there's a bunch of reasons this myth exists, and let's go through each bullet point. First, there is the pressure change. You should worry about your guitar because it's going to change pressure or climate change. Well, a lot of that myth had to do with airplanes. In other words, if you're shipping your guitar and it was going to be shipping through an airplane and it was stored underneath the plane, it would be in an unpressurized part of the plane, and therefore there would be a huge change. After talking to a couple airlines, they all stated that the entire plane is pressurized now. You're not going to see a whole lot of luggage in an unpressurized cabin. Now, that is not exclusive to airlines, because what if you ship it across like a country or from country to country, and obviously you're going to go through huge climate changes? Well, to be honest with you, again, it's not a huge factor on the guitar. Guitar necks are stronger than they look. They can actually take a lot of abuse. So let me give you an example that I thought was really interesting. What if you took a Fender Stratocaster or Les Paul and you tuned it up with 12 or 13 gauge strings to standard pitch, but then loosen those strings a little bit for shipping? Well, that wouldn't be much different in tension than a lighter gauge set. So you could easily argue that shipping a guitar in 12 gauge or 11 gauge strings, down tuned slightly, is no different than shipping a guitar in tune in 9 or 10 gauge strings. So technically, there's not a huge variance there. But why does this rumor exist when there's one huge glooming fact? The majority of all guitars are shipped in tune. In fact, it's really common, so common that if it was such an issue, we would see way more guitars that are destroyed from being in tune. Well, a lot of it has to do with the belief of rumor number 3. A lot of guitars that are shipped arrive and the headstock is broken. But that is because usually of something totally different. First of all, the most susceptible guitar to breaking, as we all know, is most likely going to be the Gibson guitar, because the headstock has a 17-degree angle. Now, what does that mean? Well, it means when you put the guitar in a case, or even worse, a gig bag or nothing at all, and it is shipped, it means the top of the headstock and the body are touching a surface. And when it receives impact from the top of the guitar, that force on the neck pushes the neck down and can snap the headstock off. And that starts the belief that it must have been the strings, because when you open the case and you see the headstock cracked and you realize that it didn't get impacted from the top of the headstock, you must assume that the strings must have broke the neck off. Well, that's not true at all. Like I said, it's the damage from the side strike. So in this myth, the question is it a bad thing to ship a guitar not in tune? In other words, detune it. And the answer is no, it's fine. The only thing you want to be aware of is, one thing you should do with either one of these situations is put a sheet of paper or piece of cardboard between the strings and the frets, especially if it's not in tune, because those strings laying on the frets could cause damage. Most important thing to take away from this myth is, if you really want to protect your guitar when shipping, worrying about its being in tune and not in tune has no relevance. Making sure it's packed extremely well does. Number 4, fretboard conditioner can damage fretboards, or is bad for fretboards. Well, if you believe this, that's fine, but keep in mind, if you think it's fine for your guitar, you're in a lot of good company. That company being almost every major guitar manufacturer and every major luthier out there believes that lemon oil is not only good for your guitar, but it should be used, and they give plenty of reasons why. 1, believe it or not, the first part of the rumor is that if you use any kind of conditioner or oil on your fretboard, it'll soak into the fretboard, make it soft, and then the frets will lift out. But the truth is, fretboard drying is actually worse for frets, and here's why. As the fretboard dries, it pulls apart, and as it pulls apart and constricts, the frets have less meat to bite into and they lift out. So not only is it more likely that dry fretboards will crack, there's more likelihood that the frets will lift than it will be if they were conditioned on a regular basis. Now, does that mean over conditioning your fretboard is bad? Well, of course, anything like that is going to be bad. All of the guitar manufacturers and luthiers that I talked to agreed that twice a year is more than adequate for conditioning your fretboard. And they also agreed that conditioning your fretboard can protect it from the dirt, oils, and nicotine in your fingers. Myth number 5. Myth number 5 is a fun one. It's pick scratches come from picks. Doesn't that seem obvious? But actually, it's not. Most pick scratches come from your fingers, not the pick itself. And the reason is, it's how we actually hold a pick. Some guitar players use a wide strumming pattern, especially acoustic players. And yes, that pick, when crossing across the strings, can hit the body and need to be protected. However, most guitar players use a technique where they use their pinky, ring finger, and middle finger and lay them across the body of the guitar or a pick guard and anchor it to start picking. This technique is what causes a lot of scratches. The movement of your fingernails across the pickguard or surface of your guitar puts those scratches there. Myth number 6. Light strings are easier to play than heavy strings. Well, here's the thing you need to think about when you decide to change strings because of comfort or ease of play. They're not always the same thing, and here's what I mean by that. Let's say you have a guitar and it has 11 gauge strings and it's a little hard on your fingers, a little hard to push down, so you go to a lighter gauge strings. Well, obviously a lighter gauge strings will require less tension, therefore it's easier to push down. However, the majority of that is in the bending. In other words, when you're bending a string, a lighter gauge string, it will be easier to bend. But lighter gauge strings have a wider range of motion and can touch the top of the frets, causing buzzing. So, thicker strings with more tension can be lowered closer to the fretboard and sometimes, by that definition, be easier to play, especially for chords. So before you go ahead and change gauge of strings, sometimes you might want to have your guitar checked out, if you're not familiar with it, by a local repair tech or luthier to see if it's playing its absolute best. The setup on the guitar is more important than just maybe changing the gauge of wire. Well, there you have it. Some myths that guitar players believe are true. This was a long video to make. I hope you guys understand that I did a lot of research on this. And not only with my own experience, but I reached out to a lot of manufacturers and industry professionals to help me with this, to give you the most accurate information I could possibly present. But with that being said, I would love to hear other myths that you guys think are true. Maybe we could do another one of these videos and I could research some more for you. There seem to be no end to these, but I would love to hear the ones that you're most interested in. Tell me myths that you guys think are true or you think are kind of not true and you would like to find the answer to either one. I don't mind doing the research. So again, I want to thank everyone who helped me with this video and this information. And I want to thank every single one of you for subscribing and coming back every week. And until next time, know your gear. I want to take a second to thank everyone who subscribed to this channel, especially the ones who support me while on Patron and buying merchandise. What you do makes this channel happen, and I want to thank you for that.